I've never experienced anything like it. Between the combination of technology that we have available that was never there before, especially digital, all of the web-based tools that we have available to aid our DXing, and a much stronger solar cycle now than we had 11 years ago. It's been quite a ride. Just for fun, I've been playing around with this program called DX Marathon. I don't know if any of you have tried this. They have a new category. They started either last year or the year before. I think it was last year, called the DX Marathon Challenge, and it's a crazy category. It's like the DXCC Marathon, except it resets on January 1st every year. So how good has propagation been? Well, the number that I've been able to achieve since January 1st is 1,500 band countries. The DX Marathon operates only on 80 through 10 meters, not including 60. Does not include 6 meters like the DXCC Challenge. And I've worked 200 countries on 20, 205 countries on 15, and 210 countries on 10. So the bands are just incredible. But unfortunately, the end is in sight. So we'll talk about that a little bit. For those of you interested in this, diving more deeply into the topic of propagation and sunspot cycles and antennas, these are 3 very excellent presentations available from the ARRL. The one on the right is not very expensive, and it's a good introduction to propagation, and it's very readable, written by experts for hams. If you really want to dive in more deeply, the ARRL handbook is where you find much more detail on propagation, and the antenna book is where all this meets the road, where you apply all this knowledge to antennas so that you can get your signal to appear all over the world. Okay, so I'm not going to read all this in detail, but these are some of the terminology. We're going to talk mostly about propagation, although the topic is solar cycle 25. What it really comes down to for almost all hams is, how does all this relate to me being able to get on the air and work the DX that I want to work? And these are some of the terminologies that bridge the gap between propagation, between the solar cycle and the propagation that lets us make the contacts we want to make. Of course, there's a solar cycle, has 4 phases: rising, maximum, declining, and minimum. We've just entered recently the declining phase, just begun. So it's very difficult from a practical on-the-air perspective to detect that we're in the declining phase, with one exception. And that is, we're starting to see a lot more disturbed days. And that's characteristic of the declining phase of the solar cycle. All of this propagation stuff derives from the sun's intense magnetic field. It's what creates sunspots, the active regions around it, and the interplanetary magnetic field that connects the sun to the Earth and all the other planets. Very importantly, the interplanetary magnetic field has magnetic orientation, just like any other magnet. And when the sun's magnetic field is oriented opposite from the Earth's magnetic field, all kinds of hell can break loose. And this is when we get K indices that are really high, and aurora visible in Los Angeles, and all kinds of crazy stuff. When we get very strong geomagnetic storms, that can only happen when the interplanetary magnetic field is oriented opposite from the Earth's magnetic field. I'll talk about that a little bit later. All of this stuff that affects propagation basically begins in what are known as active regions. These are where sunspots appear, and in that vicinity, we also find the origins of solar flares and coronal mass ejections. We'll talk about both of those in a bit. Coronal mass ejections are the sole source of very strong geomagnetic storms. Thankfully, almost all CMEs miss the Earth, but when they do hit the Earth square on, dramatic things can happen, not only to propagation, but to long-distance pipelines, to long-distance railway lines, to long-distance power distribution systems, to gas lines. All kinds of stuff can happen, not just affecting us as hams. Okay, so that's kind of the linkage between the science of solar cycles and the sun and what we're interested in as hams, as from the point of view of propagation. And I'm not going to read all this. This is kind of a background reference, but there's a couple of other aspects that are important from a propagation perspective. One is the sun rotates on approximately a 27-day rotation period. I'll talk about that in more detail a little bit later. Very importantly, the Earth's seasons have a huge effect. Propagation during the winter is vastly different than it is during the summer. And we are now in the midst of a seasonal transition from winter into spring and then soon into summer. And what you can see on the air very clearly is that the pattern we had during the winter, when propagation was especially good in the morning, has now transitioned so that propagation isn't as great early in the morning, but it peaks up later in the day, and it's especially good at night. I was on 20 and 17 meters last night after midnight, and it was just fantastic. Openings, of course, Asia with really, really strong signals in both 20 and 17. And when I went to bed, both of the bands were still great. So that hopefully will last for a few more years, but somewhat sporadic. This is a look at what the sun looks like during the various years as you go through the solar cycle. Of course, this is an illustration because you can't possibly take photographs of what the sun looks like next year. So we've passed through the solar maximum phase now and entered the declining phase, just beginning. So propagation is still pretty much like it was at solar maximum, but the end is in sight. So let's look at some forecasts. I like the forecasts that are produced by the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. They update them around the 5th to the 10th of each month. This is the most recent one from April 2025. They produce their forecasts both in terms of solar flux index, I'll describe that in a little bit, and also sunspot number. Both of those measures are proxies of the actual cause of ionization. The actual cause of ionization is extreme ultraviolet light. Thankfully, that radiation never makes it all the way to the surface of the Earth. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive. So you can measure extreme ultraviolet radiation from space, but scientists have been measuring a very popular proxy, solar flux index, which is a measure of radiation intensity from the sun at 10.7 centimeters wavelength. Been doing that since 1947. It's a pretty accurate proxy of the actual ionizing radiation, but you can't say the solar flux index is up and therefore propagation is necessarily going to be improved. For the most part, it's true, but it's a proxy. So there are some circumstances where it's not as good a measure as it is other days, but the vast majority of the time, it's excellent. So as a result, most of the charts you'll see in this presentation are in terms of solar flux index, measured in Canada every day, 3 times a day, by the Penticton Observatory in British Columbia. And you can go to the Penticton website and see the solar flux index as it's measured 3 times a day in the afternoon. Usually, I don't remember the exact times, but it's roughly 1800 Zulu, 2000 Zulu, and 2300 Zulu, something like that. And they publish it on the web 30 minutes to an hour after the measurement was actually taken. Like a lot of government organizations, the Penticton Observatory has cut back on some of their activity for funding reasons, so their information is not as widely available on weekends as it used to be, but you can still get it through the U.S. NOAA SWPC website, and usually it has the Penticton data on weekends, even though the Penticton website itself often does not have it until Monday. So let's describe this chart. This is the Marshall Space Flight Center most recent solar flux index forecast. They do it in terms of percentiles. In other words, how likely is the forecast to be correct? And the 50th percentile, which is shown in the green line, is what they believe to be a forecast that is equally likely to be too low or too high. In other words, it's not a very conservative forecast, but it's not a very aggressive forecast either. The kind of the opposite is the 95th percentile forecast, which is a very optimistic forecast. And there's a 95% chance that it will be, that all outcomes will be that level or lower. And it's not very likely, although not impossible, not very likely that the solar flux is going to get to be as high as 205, averaged over a 13-month smooth period, where we've already started to go down. So let's look at the 50th percentile of forecast, which is the one most likely to be accurate. So on this chart, I have marked a dashed purple line, and that's roughly today's date, and a dashed blue line, which is this summer, and then a horizontal line going across the screen at a solar flux value of 160. What's important about 160? From the point of view of HF operations, 10-meter propagation, especially from September to April, is generally reliable if the solar flux index is at 160 or above. And it becomes more reliable if you're above that level, but in general, 10 meters is going to be open. And what this chart is telling us from a Marshall Space Flight Center point of view is that we're going to be flirting with this 160 level after early 2026. So we've got about 1 year, more or less, of reliable 10-meter propagation ahead of us. Now, what this does not mean is that 10 meters is going to become completely unreliable after that date. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's going to be less reliable than what we've enjoyed for about the last 2 years. So we'll have to be more on our toes to get the really good 10 and 12-meter openings. Okay. So this is another look at similar data. This is from a website called solon.info. By the way, I'll make these charts available so you guys don't have to write all this stuff down. And you can distribute these slides as you wish. It's freely shareable. So this is a complicated chart. Let me explain what it's all about. This is a sunspot number in this case, not solar flux index. And a sunspot number of a little bit above 100 is what's required for 10 meters to be reliably open. So if you look at the blue line on this chart, that is the total sunspot number on the sun. But the sun actually has two simultaneous sunspot cycles, one for the northern hemisphere of the sun and one for the southern hemisphere of the sun. And there's almost always two of these sunspot cycles going on at the same time. So let's look for a moment at the last sunspot cycle, cycle 24, which is kind of a disappointing sunspot cycle. And you can very clearly see in this blue line, which is the total sunspot number for cycle 24, that there were two peaks, one in 2012 and the other in 2014, about 2 years apart. And the second one was significantly better, but nowhere near as good as what we've enjoyed over the last 2 years. And in the purple line below it is the southern hemisphere sunspot number. And notice on this chart for the last sunspot cycle, not this one, that there was a vast difference in the sunspot number between the southern hemisphere shown in purple here and the northern hemisphere smooth sunspot number, which is only about half as high during the same period of time. And if we go over and look at the current solar cycle over here, 2000, oops, on to the next slide, 2025, notice a couple things about this current sunspot cycle. Number one, it's a lot stronger than the last sunspot cycle was. And very importantly, the last sunspot cycle was really only good during the 2014 and early 2015 period right here. But notice the current sunspot cycle had relatively high numbers during 2022, 2023, 2024, and now 2025. And so we had 10-meter propagation almost every day for about 3 years, whereas in the previous sunspot cycle, we had intermittent 10-meter propagation for only about 1 year or maybe 18 months. So a vast difference. And in terms of the two sunspot cycles, the purple is the sunspot number for the southern hemisphere of the sun. That's from the solar equator southwards. And notice once again, just like the last sunspot cycle, the southern hemisphere of the sun is much more active than the northern hemisphere. Now, some people have been saying, gee, wouldn't it be great if we had a double peak sunspot cycle, just like we did back here? Well, chances are we had that. It looks like, here's the blue line right here. That's the northern hemisphere of the sun, smooth sunspot number. And it looks like in early 2023, we actually had a very small weak peak of the northern hemisphere, very similar to what happened in 2011. But then the southern hemisphere of the sun came to life, just like it did back in 2014, but much more strongly. And that's really what's been putting a smile on our face for the last couple of years. Okay, so this mess is every sunspot cycle recorded since cycle 1. And there's a couple of interesting things in the statistics of all of these sunspot cycles. The strongest one is the legendary one of solar cycle 19 right here. And that's the one you hear the old timers talking about in 1957, 1958. Most of us weren't there then, and those of us who were generally had pretty basic stations. There were very few sophisticated stations in 1957, like what we have today. And even the most sophisticated stations were probably running AM, and we're probably using small tri-banders or 10-meter beams. And, you know, today's ham radio is a whole lot different than it was in 1957. But what's important about this chart? What's important is that we're at month 65 of the current solar cycle. Notice, and here's these dashed lines show all of these sunspot cycles 65 months into the cycle. And notice all of these graphs for all of the cycles are in decline by month 65, with no exceptions. Every sunspot cycle is in decline after month 65. And superimposed on these sunspot number graphs for all of the 19 cycles, or I'm sorry, all the 25 cycles, is this black bar and the dots that I've added to it, which is the ongoing solar cycle and the forecast for the future. And notice, I'll show you the some more forecasts. They were all forecasting a decline starting at month 65. No exceptions ever to that rule. It's not to say this year couldn't be an exception, but it's highly unlikely given all of the data we have. This is another illustration looking over more sunspot cycles of how sunspot cycles tend to have two peaks. This doesn't show cycle 25. And how the northern and southern hemisphere cycles are offset sometimes by as much as 2 years, and they're often very different strengths. So let's take a look at some current data. This image of the sun's surface.
Frank, if I could interrupt for just 1 second, could everyone make sure that they're muted? Someone has their microphone on. Thank you.
Much better. Okay. These are time-lapse images of the surface of the sun taken by an amateur astronomer. And you can see if you look at this, that there's a whole lot more sunspots in this time-lapse photography in the southern hemisphere of the sun compared to the northern hemisphere. And the other thing that's very apparent in this image is in the northern hemisphere, which has been pretty weak. There were a couple of strong sunspots, but almost all the sunspots were pretty weak. So that's kind of an interesting image. And the other interesting bar graph here shows the hemispheric sunspot numbers that I showed you in those graphs, but it shows you in a little different way for the last year through January 2025 of the relative sunspot numbers between the southern hemisphere in red and the northern hemisphere in green. And let's just take a look here, January 2025. And people were kind of getting interested because, you know, there's this hope that there could be a second peak during 2025. And in January 2025, the northern hemisphere of the sun was almost, not quite, but very close to being as active as the southern hemisphere. But unfortunately, after January, everything quieted way down. So that optimism faded away. So it was kind of an anomaly. You know, people were hoping that these red numbers were going down and maybe the green numbers were going up, and that by where we are right now, we'd be having big numbers for the northern hemisphere, the green vertical line, but that's not happening. And here's another look at the at our future. The Space Weather Prediction Center updates their forecast of solar cycle 25 once a month, usually in early April. And this is their most recent forecast going forward. So, and explaining a couple of things on their chart. The black line is the monthly solar flux index, average number, and this was January 2024. I'm sorry, July 2024, when the solar flux shot way up. And we were hoping, wow, maybe this is the beginning of a really, really strong cycle. But what actually happened is this was just one very, very active sunspot region on the sun in the summer of last year, but it faded away. And what's happened to the monthly numbers since last summer is they have gradually gone downwards. And for March 2025,
Frank, we've lost your screen.
oh, well, I still have it. And still,
We still have it here. So
did someone say you still have it?
yeah,
Yes.
we have it at the meeting.
And I have it also.
Yeah, so it's going out. There's nothing I can do. It says that it's screen sharing, so I guess it must be a local problem at someone's home. Okay. So going back to this April 2025 NOAA SWPC chart. This is their forecast going forward. You can see this kind of hopeful peak that occurred last July and faded away. And now the monthly solar flux index has declined down to 160. Remember, that's kind of the critical value for reliable 10-meter propagation. So it's steady declines over the last 9 months or so. And we don't know for sure where this is going, but usually these NOAA forecasts are pretty good. And what they're forecasting is a steady but slow decline over the next couple of years. And remember, a solar flux index of 160 tends to be the threshold at which 10 meters starts to become less reliable. Notice I didn't say 10-meter propagation was going to go away, but it requires more patience for DXers once that number drops below 160. So according to this NOAA forecast, that number is forecast to drop below 160 in about a year, maybe a little bit less than a year from now. There's a pretty wide error band on that forecast, so it could be as late as the summer of 2026. But sometime between late this year and late 2026, 10 meters is likely to become less reliable than what we've enjoyed over the last 3 years. And one other aspect of the solar cycle, now that we're in this declining phase, is disturbed days have now become much more common. This is a normal aspect of solar cycles. Once you get past solar maximum, there's a period of 2 or 3 years when geomagnetic storming conditions become more common. And the 50th percentile forecast from the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center suggests that we're going to stay about the same in terms of the AP index, which is a measure of geomagnetic activity. We're likely to stay at about that level for the next 3 years or so until 2028. And then after 2028, things will finally settle down from a geomagnetic storm perspective. And that will be the key event that begins to improve the 160-meter band especially. And to some degree also the 80-meter band will be improved, but 160 will be especially improved. So this period of disturbed conditions is a normal feature of every sunspot cycle. And we certainly have experienced that in this cycle over the last 6 to 9 months. So I'm just going to show a couple of slides that kind of show what's going on in general on the sun. The image in the upper left-hand corner is an image of one of the largest sunspots ever seen. Notice it's much bigger than the approximate size of the Earth. Shown in the upper right-hand corner is a little video clip of a sunspot taken with high-resolution imagery. And you can see all of the activity that's going on inside of a sunspot. The center of the sunspot is very dark because sunspots have very strong solar magnetic fields extending out into space, and those magnetic fields cool the corona on the sun, and it's visible in terms of light as a dark area. And in the lower left-hand corner is another video clip that shows how sunspots change over time as the sun rotates during its 27-day cycle. So things don't stay the same. And that was certainly the case last summer with this very, very active sunspot that just seemed to keep growing and growing and growing during July. Now, what about the negative aspects on the sun? So that, what we really like, but it's not the real world. What we would really like is to have sunspot activity causing ionization of the ionosphere to allow us to work DX, but none of the other things associated with active regions on the sun. But that's just not real. There are aspects of radiation from the sun that create beneficial ionization, and there are also forms of radiation from the sun that cause geomagnetically disturbed days. One of the most common causes of minor geomagnetic storms, and we've been experiencing that over the last couple of weeks especially, is a feature of the sun's corona called high-speed streams. And this is the source of the high-speed solar wind, and is the dominant cause of minor geomagnetic storms. This image in the lower left-hand corner is just a couple of days old, and it is the feature that has been causing so much havoc on the sun for the last couple of weeks. And looking at this image, that's this very current image. This dark area is a coronal hole. This is a wide area of the sun with open magnetic fields that extend far out into space, and it allows the escape of highly charged particles. The main thing to notice about this, and this is the thing that is causing us so much havoc, is that this is a very, very large coronal hole, but also, most unusually, it extends almost the entire way from both rims of the visible sun. And right now, it's pointing right at the Earth. So this is huge. The width of this coronal hole is 450,000 miles. Yeah, 450,000 miles wide. So it is affecting the Earth for almost a 2-week period. Thankfully, its effects seem to have moderated a little bit over the last day. I mentioned how good 20 and 17 meters were last night. Thankfully, this feature of the sun is going to rotate back around to the backside of the sun, and hopefully it will die before the sun gets turned around back towards us. The cartoon on the lower right-hand corner just shows open magnetic field lines flowing from coronal holes. This happened to be an image where the coronal hole was distributed north-south, rather than this really nasty one that's on the sun right now that is extended east-west. So, good thing about the current situation with minor geomagnetic storms, they tend to be relatively short. They tend to last for a few hours. But unfortunately, this coronal hole is so big that it's causing one disturbance after another after another. But they are weak coronal holes. Yes, they're weak coronal holes and weak high-speed streams that do not cause the kind of auroras, for example, that extend all the way down to Los Angeles, like the coronal mass ejections cause. This kind of situation with coronal holes is going to continue for 2 or 3 years. But hopefully we are not going to see very many more of these coronal holes that extend across 750,000 miles of the visible surface of the sun. That's very rare. These kind of recurrent events on the sun tend to occur in 27-day repeating cycles. And the reason for that is that the sun rotates on a 27-day rotation period at the latitudes at which sunspots, coronal holes, and solar flares occur. The sun is a gas star, so it doesn't rotate at the same speed as our rocky Earth. But 27 days is the nominal rotation period. And this huge coronal hole that's been causing all the problems this week was also causing problems 27 days ago. And some of these very big coronal holes can survive for 3 periods or 4 periods of rotation of the sun. So it would not surprise me if this huge coronal hole pops up again in about 3 weeks. Let's hope not, but it's a pretty good chance it will. And more videos. So another type of event that you certainly hear a lot about, and you're going to hear more about it now that we're after solar maximum and these disturbances on the sun become more common. Solar flares, and this is some imagery of what a solar flare looks like. It explodes both electromagnetic energy as well as particle energy out into space. The numbers are incredible, megatons per second of particulate matter. And what's most important about solar flares is the X-ray radiation from the solar flare. That's electromagnetic. It travels at the speed of light. And as a result, we don't know that one is coming. And from the moment of the solar flare occurring on the sun until we could see that flare with a telescope or see the effects on the radio, they occur at the same time, 8 minutes after the explosion from the sun. And what's the effect with DXing and ham radio? It's radio blackouts during the day. And some of you have probably experienced them during this sunspot cycle, and now they're becoming more common. Now, most of these radio blackouts only last for a minute or two. So by the time we're aware that propagation has degraded, it very quickly reconstitutes. But every so often, one of these solar flares is much more intense than normal, and it can cause a blackout that lasts for an hour or two, and that will get our attention, as the bands seem like they're totally dead. It's not unusual for hams to start trying to debug their equipment, to go outside and see if their antennas have fallen down or feed lines have failed. It's just that bad. But it's a daytime only phenomena. Solar flares do not affect HF propagation on the dark side of the Earth, only on the light side. Solar flares are measured in terms of their intensity. The only ones that affect HF radio are M-class flares and X-class flares. Much more common than either of those are C-class flares that you might see reported. They have no measurable effect on HF propagation. The X10 and stronger ones are the ones that cause havoc, not only with propagation, but also with very widespread metallic objects like gas pipelines and railroad lines and power lines. These are the famous ones that have caused power outages in Canada that extended for thousands of miles and destroyed power transformers. Hopefully we won't see one of those, but you never know. So I think I've already discussed the things that are on this slide. These are the blackouts associated with severe X-class solar flares. Hopefully we won't experience any of those over the next 3 or 4 years, but there's a pretty good chance we will. Now, the really severe effects are caused by what are called coronal mass ejections. These are the explosions from the sun that cause megatons per second of very highly charged particles exploding out into space. It takes 2 or 3 days typically for this material to flow from the sun to the earth. This is not electromagnetic radiation like from solar flares. This is actually particles, and they cannot travel at the speed of light. So it typically takes 2 or 3 days, and the effects can be very severe, especially when the interplanetary magnetic field is oriented opposite from the orientation of the Earth's magnetic field for more than a few hours. I'm just going to click through some of these. Okay. So for the most severe geomagnetic storms, the one that caused a visible aurora down into Florida and Southern California and northern Mexico, that occurred during a period when the interplanetary magnetic field, in other words, the sun's magnetic field extending into space, when it was oriented opposite to the Earth's magnetic field, causes exactly the same kind of effect as 2 horseshoe magnets oriented opposite from one another. You remember those science experiments from elementary school. When the horseshoe magnets are oriented opposite from each other, they attract very strongly. And that's exactly what happens when the IMF is oriented opposite from the orientation of Earth's magnetic field. And it causes very, very strong geomagnetic storms. And that's what happened when the aurora was visible down in Los Angeles last year. Okay. So we're going to shift over now to a kind of a quick tour of what's happening with propagation. We're kind of done with looking at the solar causes of all the good stuff and the bad. Solar maximum propagation conditions began roughly December of 2022, and they're likely to continue, although the end is in sight, into early 2026, possibly as much as the middle of 2026. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be like a light switch being turned off. Propagation will simply become less reliable than what we've gotten used to. So 10-meter propagation and 12-meter propagation have been really, really strong for the past couple of years, even extending into the night, especially during the winter. And 15 meters propagation, it's not, there have been occasions when 15 meters has been open well after midnight. And last night was one of those nights. When I was on both 20 meters, 17 meters, and 15 meters, and all 3 of them were solidly open into Asia. after midnight, and signals were remarkably strong. One of the very important features of solar maximum is that nighttime propagation really becomes excellent, especially on 20 and 40 meters. And this sunspot cycle is likely to keep this nighttime propagation on 20 and 40 continuing well through 2026, maybe even 2027. So it's not just 10 meters like we usually think about, 10 meters and 12 meters benefiting from the sunspot cycle, but also nighttime propagation is very much improved during solar maximum, and that's likely to continue for 1 or 2 more years. Unfortunately, as I showed in the previous charts, geomagnetic disturbances are going to continue just as they had for the last year or so, and probably continue for another 2 or maybe 3 years at about the level we're seeing right now. And then by about 2029, these will just be distant memories of sunspot maximum and all the good and the bad that comes with it. So let's just take a quick snapshot look at the bands. 10 and 15 meters from the point of view of a contester, or 15, 12, and 10 meters from the point of view of a DXer are open just about every day from September through May, and 15 meters is pretty much open every day. And even last year, during that huge peak that we had in the solar cycle last July and August, even 10 meters was open most days to Europe and sometimes to Japan during late July and August. Very surprising. Unfortunately, that was kind of a transient thing, and we're probably not going to see that again this summer, but you never know. 20 meters, of course, is the king of all DX bands. It provides reliable daytime and nighttime worldwide propagation throughout the year, but not during midday hours in the summer. 20 meters is not a good DX.
You are looking for.
There's a DX spot. I wonder what that was. And I'm not going to look. 20 meters fades pretty badly during the middle of the day in the summer, from middle of June or so until middle of August. And that's just the feature of the ionosphere. I don't have enough time to explain why that happens. It would take about 20 minutes to explain what's going on there, and I don't have that much time. But suffice it to say that 20 meters is a great DX band throughout the year, except during the middle of the day in the summer. But usually 17 meters is just fine during that same period when 20 meters goes into a funky period in the midday. 40 meters is a reliable nighttime DX band throughout the night during the years near solar maximum, and that's likely to continue for the next 2 or 3 years. And even 80 meters isn't bad. I worked 3 alpha on 80 meters last night, and I worked at SV5 on 80 meters last night, and both had quite good signals. So you never know. In both cases, it was near midnight. So looking at 10 meters, of course, 10 meters improved dramatically since late 2022, and it's still really, really good right now, except for these disturbed days that are becoming more common. We're going to be entering the sporadic E season, probably by May. Sporadic E will become more and more common. So on the days when F region propagation isn't so good, we might get lucky enough to get sporadic E that fills in the gaps. Sporadic E is often the dominant 10-meter propagation mode from May through early August, and that might happen again this year. So the 15-meter band at this part of the sunspot cycle tends to be pretty good during almost the entire year. Not quite as good in the summer as it is in the winter, but still pretty good. And that's likely to continue now for another year, maybe 2 years. Sporadic E can also be helpful on 15 on those days when F region propagation isn't as good. And 17 meters, as those of you active on that band, is a pretty good second to 20 meters in terms of reliability. There's so much activity there now on the digital part of the band that it's kind of surprising, the kind of stuff that you can work in the middle of the night, like last night. 20 meters has been a fantastic nighttime band during solar maximum, and that's likely to continue for another 2 or 3 years. And then we'll get to a situation in the winter where 20 meters starts closing down during the night. But that's a couple of years away, 2 or 3 years away before that starts to happen. 40 meters is a fantastic nighttime band, and this part of the sunspot cycle keeps it alive all through the night. In about 3 years, 40 will become less reliable. And most hams don't think about 40 meters being affected by the solar cycle, but it very definitely is. And the DXM becomes less reliable as you get near midnight and past midnight as we approach solar minimum, but that's quite a ways away. 80 meters. I mentioned that yesterday, 20 meters, 17 and 15 meters were really good around midnight and after. Well, so was 80 meters. There was all kinds of interesting stuff there, including the 3 alpha, which is very, very rare on 80, and also the SV5, which you don't often hear on that band. In the 160-meter band, well, that band's been pretty badly affected by solar maximum for a couple of reasons. One has to do with propagation. It increases the E region activity on 160 and tends to block propagation from getting to the F region. But equally important, perhaps more important, is that the other bands are so good during the solar maximum years and continuing through at least 2027, that the activity on 160 is severely degraded just because the other bands are so good. So I'm going to close out the presentation with a couple of really valuable tools. So I've talked very broadly about propagation and forecasts, but I really like to use these nowcasting tools. These are tools that allow you to see what's happening with propagation right now, and with actual activity on the ham bands. And you can see at the bottom of the screen is the website where this particular nowcasting tool on the reverse beacon network is available. This particular snapshot from the website was taken near midnight a couple of years ago, showing propagation only on the 80-meter band, and you can see, just like you'd expect, the green lines show actual propagation occurring at that time, in real time, at midnight, between Europe and the Middle East, and mostly the eastern part of the United States. The red dots represent receivers on the reverse beacon network. Users of this website can tailor how the website is set up, and you can see how I had set it up to produce this graphic. It was showing signals that were being spotted in North America in this selection in the lower left-hand corner, and in terms of DX that was being spotted, it was DX from Europe. And you can set this page up for individual continents or CQ zones or DXCC countries. It's a lot of flexibility, and you can select a whole bunch of different bands, either individually or in combination. Usually for the reverse beacon network, you can select CW, but you can select any of the several popular modes. And the other one I'm going to show you is this one, which is really, really good. And even if you're not a user of the digital modes, this is still a very powerful real-time tool that uses the digital modes to show actual real-time propagation. And I had set up this particular web page to show 20 meters at 2200 Zulu to show FT8 signals being heard in North America during that period, right at 2200 Zulu. And you can see there's a whole lot of activity when this was taken. And you can also customize this page. It's called psk-reporter.info to show individual continents, individual DXCC countries, or even individual call signs to see what kind of activity is going on. I like to use this page to see if stations in Asia are currently being heard on the East Coast before I start devoting a lot of attention to seeing whether I can hear them. You know, if let's say EY100 IARU, who's been pretty active this week, if they're on the air, I'd like to know if any North American stations have heard it. So just poke in the EY100 IARU call sign on this webpage, and within seconds, I'll know if anyone in North America is hearing them. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. We managed to go just an hour. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be pleased to try to address them here, or you can send me email. I've had the same email address shown on my QRZ.com page for the last nearly 40 years. So back over to net control.
Frank, this is Jim K6ZH. Could you just make a couple of quick remarks about 6 meters? I know it's a whole different kettle of fish, but
it is. And you know, a lot of us had grand hopes that this solar cycle would be so powerful, particularly last summer when this happened. Let's see. Yes, when this happened last July, a lot of us had grand hopes that maybe this was the beginning of a huge sunspot cycle and that these monthly sunspot numbers would continue to grow. Well, it didn't happen. We had that 1 month of really big numbers, and now it's been in steady decline right until this month. The only period of really interesting F region propagation that I'm aware of that occurred on 6 happened for several days last November, when we had F region propagation into Japan from the East Coast for a day or two, and probably more from the West Coast. But that didn't last for very long. And some of us here on the East Coast on 6 meters were working into the Indian Ocean. There was a couple of days of propagation into India, but it is as quickly as it came on the scene in early November. In a few days, it was gone, and sadly, it's not coming back. So what we're dependent on right now is transequatorial propagation, TEP, which is normally the stuff that connects the stations, let's say, mostly in Southern California, closer to the Mexican border, the better, or similarly in Arizona or far southern Texas. And they get fairly reliable propagation into Argentina, or VP8, although VP8 is outside the TEP zone. But that's about the best we're going to get. And then in a couple more years, we're going to be dependent upon sporadic E again. We'll get to enjoy that. But I'm afraid this sunspot cycle turned out to be a dud, except for those couple of days of last November. Back to you.
Jim said it's not what he wanted to hear.
No, but it's what happened, sadly.
I'll tell you, you're surely showing the regional differences. I'd love to work SV5 on 80 meters, even on FT8.
Yeah, he was on FT8. He's probably there again tonight. He had a
Great
good
talk.
signal too. Very good signal.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It seems like as the solar flux index increased, the sporadic E, we have had a lot of sporadic E to Europe on 6 meters. As the solar flux increased, it's kind of diminished. Is there any correlation?
Yeah, but it's complicated. And I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail because it'll take probably more time than most people listening to this want me to devote it to.
Okay, a better question that is,
But let me address it just very briefly. What's happening is during solar maximum, the ionizing radiation from the sun is significantly enhanced. And what that causes is heating in the ionosphere. The process of ionization produces heat. And there's a whole lot more heat being generated in the ionosphere at this part of the sunspot cycle, especially at the altitude of where the sporadic E propagation occurs, where the sporadic E ionization occurs. So what's happening is it's a lot hotter where those sporadic E clouds are supposed to be forming, and that causes winds to occur. Just like the part of the Earth where we live, where winds are a normal feature of the atmosphere, well, high in the atmosphere, in the ionosphere, especially where sporadic E forms, there are winds there also. And those wind shears are what cause sporadic E propagation. But unfortunately, during solar maximum, and this is not just this year, but for all of the solar maximums, there's a lot more turbulence at the altitude where sporadic E forms, and it's much less reliable. So it's much more sporadic than normal. But by about 2028, maybe 2027, sporadic E will become more reliable, just like it was during the 5 years near solar minimum last cycle. That's going to return again, and we'll start to see more frequent, more reliable, more long distance sporadic E. So it's caused by heating, caused by the ionizing solar radiation that gets all the way down into the E region and messes up our sporadic E. So that's a nickel description of what's going on. And it happens during every solar maximum.
I guess, does the heating cause recombination to increase?
No, at that level, there's okay. So we have to get into the physics of sporadic E. If you remember, sporadic E is caused by not by ionization of atomic oxygen, which is what happens at the F region. Instead, it's caused by the influx of trying to find an easy way to describe this in a very brief format. The seed corn for sporadic E is micrometeorites, and as they collide with the Earth's atmosphere, when they get down to the level where sporadic E forms, that is what the causation is of the ionization, is the influx of micrometeorites, not the kind of ionization that happens up in the F region, where it's ionizing radiation impinging upon oxygen atoms. Well, the good news about the ionization of micrometeorites is that those ions are very long-lived, unlike the ionization of oxygen atoms. And it's not unusual for that ionization to last for hours. And that's not what's causing the problems we have during solar maximum. It's not recombination. It's actually creating the kind of wind shear activity that's needed to create high density of these ionized particles, that's it, electrons, not particles. The high density of free electrons that result from this ionization process. So we need more stable wind shear conditions, and it's not recombination is not the problem.
Thanks. Yeah, I see what you say. So if you have a higher wind shear, the clouds do not form; they're more dispersed.
Yeah, there's the wind shears do not occur with enough reliability to make us happy. That's what it amounts to. The wind shears still happen, but at this part of the solar cycle, most of the sporadic E that we observe is one hot. It isn't as widespread on a global scale to create the long distance sporadic E. Like in about 3 years from the West Coast, you're going to start getting reliable sporadic E to Japan again. And we even get some of that on the East Coast. But it's going to be a while, a few years before that happens frequently.
Yeah, we had some good backscatter during transequatorial that you point south and you work the Caribbean, point south, you point towards South America and you work the Pacific, and you worked Africa. We had some African events. They're really
Yep.
cool.
But that's F region stuff. That's TEP. So that's totally unrelated to sporadic E. It's enhanced ionization. And yes, you point south to do that. And if you're in the Caribbean, it's even crazier in terms of what TEP will do. And of course, this is really noticeable at 6 meters. During last October, November, and the year before, some of the stations in Central America and the Caribbean were working the long path on 6. And they were reporting situations where, in order to work some of this propagation, they also had to point south in order to work stuff that was really not that you wouldn't expect to work by pointing your antenna south. So it's the magic band in more ways than one. I'm not aware that anyone in the US, other than maybe on the very southern periphery of the US, that was working any 6 meter long path of this solar cycle via TEP. But 6 meters is truly magic when this stuff is happening. Any other questions?
This is kind of off a little bit, but have you ever looked into HAARP, HAARP, radiation patterns?
No, I have not. So I can't comment on that. I'm aware of what it is. I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Okay, Frank. Well, thank you very much. That was a wonderful talk. Thank
Who
you.
should I send my slides to, and then you guys can distribute it if you wish.
Either Bob, or you could send it to me, or send it to Bud. Any of us.
Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a PDF version. It's much easier to share, so we won't have those little video clips. But apart from that, it'll all be there. I might have to eliminate a slide or two. there's a couple of slides that have several megabytes of data. So I might have to eliminate one or two slides, but apart from that, it'll be complete. So I'll get that sent out in the next day or two.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening. And I was
Okay,
going to say
73, everybody.
73. I was going to say good night, but it sounds like you're going on the air again.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take a quick look and see what's happening on 17 and 15. You never know. It's solar maximum, you know.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good night.
73.
Thank you. 73.
So before we do the roundtable, I have one quick item that I'd like to throw out for discussion. We'd like to resurrect the summer bash this summer, and the board discussed it at our last board meeting, and we were kind of trying to figure out a good month. August, September get pretty hot in San Diego. As for locations, rather than doing it at someone's house and putting the burden on them, we were thinking we'd do it in a park. And I was looking at San Diego Park, which is near Rancho Santa Fe. It's kind of centrally located. If the folks from Southern Cal wanted to come down, it's not too far, and it's right by the freeway. People from South Bay could come up, and it's close to the ocean, so it's a little cooler. So I was just thinking out loud, and I wanted to discuss with the group if July would be a good time, and are people traveling then, or would maybe October be better? I mean, just throwing it out for discussion purposes. And also, as the fair, we were thinking about having it catered with a barbecue chicken and barbecue ribs. So does anyone have any thoughts they want to talk about? If not, we'll go to the roundtable.
July's better.
July's better? Okay. Yeah, it could get cold. And anybody have any thought? July, good for everybody?
I don't know what it costs to rent San Diego. If you went back to Old Howard Park, we're residents, so we get.
I looked online, and it would be less than $200. The bugaboo is that they charge $5 per car for parking. So I'd recommend that it's a countywide thing. So I would recommend that people carpool to go over there.
Get a pass that lasts a lifetime.
Uh-huh.
And then
I was wondering also if they have senior discount. I think everybody in this crowd is a senior. So I don't know. Really?
Good at every county park.
Oh,
Yeah, about 10 years ago, you go to Park, because Park had Palomar. had-
oh yeah, they have it up at Dixon Lake. Oh no, Ayers has it at Dixon Lake, and they have it free for
San Diego
seniors. Yeah,
Park, San-
San Diego. Okay. All right. Well, we'll chew it around a little bit and keep tuned for any additional information. I'm going to turn it around for the.
You want to talk about Isaiah too?
No.
Okay, yeah. Okay, hi, this is Bob, W6ACU, been working, FT8 propagation has been great, although 6 meters has been disappointing, although the trans-equatorial signals have been great up until the last few days into South Pacific and South America. I'm still trying to get Galapagos on 6 meters, but they haven't shown up so far.
Gail, K6GO, and we were in Visalia and had a really good time there. And we had a YL forum. Joan and Jim were there too, Mike was, and about 20 YLs and 25 or so. So that was successful and working mostly FT8. And I've been really, really busy because I'm on the ARRL Foundation Committee. So we have been reading scholarship applications and interviewing young people via Zoom online. And so there are some really wonderful young people. And it's a lot of work, but it's been a great, great pleasure. So that's not over. I still have a lot more to read, but I thought I'd report on that.
Mike NA6MB, Visalia also was pretty good, kind of small this year, about 300 people. Some question about whether it's going to continue. So if you want to volunteer to help the Northern guys 2 years from now, that's good. Otherwise, there's a guy that's trying to make one, not in Visalia, but in Santa Maria next year. We'll see if he can pull it off. Other than that, let's see. Yeah, just a few things. Just before we left in the winter in January, I discovered that I had worked my last zone that I needed so I applied for worked all zones, but I haven't gotten it yet. So I have to see if I can check on what's going on with that. What was it? Worked all zones. Oh, 30. It's in Africa somewhere. 34.
Bunch of 30s. Yeah, 34 is always a tough one.
It's like Egypt, yeah.
Yeah.
Age of 34.
Yeah.
Jim and Joan and 6KIM, K6ZH, we were in Visalia as well. And, it was a good time. I mean, it's smallish and expensive-ish, but it was what it was. I've been primarily monitoring 6 meters, FT8, and as been mentioned, we had a lot of transequatorial stuff. And if you're on very much, like I have been, and Bob and others, you pretty much have worked the dozen or so LUs and CEs. There's only a certain number of them, and NHCs in Ecuador. But I had a big surprise 2 weeks ago working VP6MW on Pitcairn on 6 meters. And that was just one of those things I use JT Alert connected to WSJTX. And so I was doing something in the shack and I heard new grid, new country. It's like, whoa, let's get over there quick. And I worked her and I don't know that she was up, down, and that was it. So, anyway, you never know. The magic band.
Howdy, Levi K6JO. I've been busy being the DX or operating from different stations. I've been all over the place in the last few months since the last time I was here. Looks like #1 claimed in ARRL-DX, and then then I was in at ND7K for WPX multi, and then that's mostly it. And then coming up, we've got June VHF, which I'll be putting in a big effort with the N6MI crew up in DMO5, and then I'll be up at KM7W in Montana for field day this year. So pretty busy this year.
Don Therio, N6 BTF, not really nothing to report this month. N6JOJ here. Nice to see Ed out there. And one day, last Thursday, I guess it was, I got out the shack. It was about 7:30 in the evening, and I was on 20 meters FT8, and I saw Qatar come in, and I one push of the button, and he came right back to me, and it was confirmed on Logbook of the World the next morning. So I was happy with that one. Other than that, not a whole lot going on. I missed Visalia. I'll probably never get up there again, but I had fun the years I went.
Well, I'm Jim, November 6 Victor Hotel. This is my wife, Linda, Whiskey Alpha 6 high gain antenna, or his girl's adorable. We're not members yet, but I hope to become one soon. For many years, I had another commitment on Wednesday nights, most Wednesday nights, but I don't have those anymore. So we're planning on being here, hopefully. I have 313 countries confirmed. Linda isn't quite there yet. She has 53 confirmed, but she's working on it. I'm her packet cluster. And so that's basically the story. Linda, anything to say? I'm sorry, Santee.
As Jim said, WA6HGA. I was at the YL Forum in Visalia, and Gail invited us, and Jim had been thinking about it for quite a while. So here we are. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jim, K6SMT. I'm still trying to get up a decent antenna because of the HOA, so I'm going to try a gray line flagpole antenna in the backyard. if they'll approve that, they should. So other than that, nothing to report.
I'm Steve, K6RSH. Microsoft and myself are enemies right now. They did an unauthorized update and killed my JT8. And I did a rollback, got it running, and I guess I left the laptop running at night. They went and reloaded it overnight, and I have never been able to get the rollback to work again. So I'm having to restart. So I've been down for 1 week.
Welcome, Jim and XYL. Thank you for coming. We'll go to the online people. Steve, KE6FV. How are you doing?
Well, I would have liked to have been at the meeting. I've tell you, I've listened to. I was sitting there probably north of 1,000 technical discussions, but I got to say, without question or reservation, tonight's presentation by W3LPL was absolutely out of this world. I mean, that was absolutely fabulous, and I am so glad that I didn't miss it. As far as other activity, I'm also celebrating Country 346 with my confirmations for Mount Athos. It's only taken me 62 years to, or 68 years to work them, and hopefully I'll get them on a few more bands if they get back on the air. Finally, vis-a-vis tonight's presentation, a little bit depressing because I'm not sure that I'm going to be around to see the peak of the next solar cycle. So something to think about. But anyway, I was really glad I could make it, and hopefully we'll see you at one of the lunches.
Great. Thanks for stopping by. And just a programming note, we do record these meetings so that someone could go back and look at it if they missed it. Ron, WA6YOU, how are things in Virginia?
Pretty good. Can't complain. I have 330 confirmed, and we are all around here waiting for Marion Island ZS8 to come up. I hear he's still on the boat, and that would put me at 331, maybe a shot at getting on the honor roll. So it's been, same here, 63 years. So anyway, back to you. I'll see you next month.
Great. Thanks very much for stopping by, and have a good evening. Bob, K9RHY, how are things? And thank you for the newsletter.
Oh, it's my pleasure to do that. No news to report, but I'm going to echo what I heard about the W3LPL presentation. That was the best propagation presentation that I've ever seen. And I certainly wish I had seen it several sunspot cycles ago, because it would have given me some insight that I didn't have at the time. So the new Zoom setup that I'm seeing tonight is great. And this is terrific. I wish the other clubs that I belong to that use Zoom were able to put on a show like this. This is great. So I wish I had seen everybody in Visalia. I enjoyed my trips to Visalia when I was living in California. And unfortunately, if it's going away, it's going away. But the spirit is still with us. So good DX to everyone.
Great. Thanks very much, and good to see you. We'll see you next month. Mill, K6SY, how are things up north? Maybe Mel stepped away from his computer. Ed, AI60, how are things with you?
Doing well, thanks, and good evening to everybody. My big project right now is I'm back here in Missouri. They have basements in the houses, and I've got this basement that's about 40 feet wide and 40 feet deep and 70 feet wide. And it was totally vacant. So I'm the last month I've been building it out, and I'm about ready for drywall now. Be putting in my shower, sink, and bathroom down here. So I've had to relocate my station from one part of the basement to the other, and my lighting is really bad, so I've got to work on that. But anyway, activities. My good buddy is K6ZH. I'm always running into him in contests, and also K6JO there. And I want to say a special good evening to N6JOJ. Always been in touch with him regularly since I've left California, and a good friend. And other than that, enjoyed the presentation. Great job by the presentation there. Also wanted to say, while I think of it, I surely love the DX bulletin from the club. And Bob, you do a great job, and I thoroughly enjoy it. It's a top-notch publication, and you can be proud of it. We are proud of it, I'm sure. That's it for me, 73.
Great. Thanks very much. And stay out of the bad weather also.
I'm trying.
When you were talking about basements, that's what I was thinking. Bob,
Yeah.
AK6R, how are things with you?
Good to see everybody again. I haven't checked in for a while, and everything looks like it's doing great. I missed Visalia this year, but we did go to Yuma, and I understand it was almost bigger than Visalia. So we had a good time over there as usual. And let's see what else. Oh yeah, I just confirmed my 313th country, and I got on 30 meters about 2 nights ago, and I could not believe the number of Europeans and everything that I was working. I must have worked 200 countries on FT8 in about 2 hours. It was just crazy. And then Asia opened up, and it was like bang, 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 bang. So I've never seen 30 meters being as good as it is. And LPL's is a presentation tonight kind of confirmed that, saying that 40 was really good. Well, 30's really been pretty good too. So check it out if you haven't been up there for a while. It was surprisingly strong signals all over the place. So having a lot of fun with FT8, doing a lot of Zoom presentations. And if you're local, the EARS auction is 2 Saturdays from now. It's May 3rd. I happen to be the auctioneer, so I'm just trying to drum up some business for those guys. And if you're going to be there, it's a Saturday morning, and the information's on their website. So good to see everybody again, and 73s, and catch you later.
73, thanks for stopping by. And I think of 30 meters is like 40 on steroids.
Yes.
Warren, KN6ZZI, good evening. Are you a club member?
I am not.
Oh, well, welcome.
Thanks for letting me join you. Bill Shell, N6WS, encouraged me to join. Unfortunately, I joined a little late and missed most of the propagation, the solar presentation, so I'd like to see that. I live in Santa Barbara. I'm a newer ham, licensed in May of 23. However, I've really thrown myself into it with great passion. I have 247 countries confirmed.
Wow.
And I would invite anyone who's interested to work me in Cape Verde. My call sign for the month of May, I'll be on Santiago Island. My call sign Delta 44 Zulu Zulu India. I'll be there with another ham, a seasoned African expeditioner, Harald Becker is his name. You may have worked him in Rwanda or Burkina Faso and a few other countries. So he's kind of showing me the ropes of holiday style de-expeditioning, but we'll be active on all the bands and all the modes for the most part. And both of us are, we're pretty committed to working hard. So I'm sure if you give us a try and the propagation works for us, we'll be able to work each other. So I'll pause there, but thanks for having me as a guest.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for stopping by, and come back anytime. The 3rd or the 4th Wednesday of the month, we have our meetings at 6:30, and they're all on Zoom, so it's easy for you to check in from Santa Barbara. And Bob, what's the link for the recorded programs?
I'll publish it. It's unique. It'll be just on YouTube under San Diego DX Club.
Okay. On YouTube under San Diego DX Club, it will have the link for the program tonight, so you'll be able to go back and look at it.
Very well. I'll have a look for that link. Thanks again.
Good,
By
and
the
we'll
way, I'm been a member of the Southern California DX Club, and of course the Santa Barbara Amateur Radio Club. I'm on the board of the local club and putting on field day. So if you're looking for a place to work field day, come up and join us. We're at Chase Palm Field, right next to Stearns Wharf. Should be a good deal.
great. Well, I hope you get some good weather up there.
Yeah.
Bill, N6RV, how are things with you?
Doing fine, trying to keep the virtual Southern California DS Club going. And we still have a good turnout on Zoom. Was at Visalia also, had a good time there. Mostly reconnecting with people. You know, we see everybody, or we're on Discord. We have a Discord server. It's DX Chat, and that's we all meet there every day, but we don't see each other very often face to face. So that was very good. And I talked to Jim Niger, and he's the one that's making the attempt to start a convention or a gathering at Santa Maria. He's already reserved the Santa Maria Inn, and he said it was like $99 a night plus tax, you know, and he's very adamant about it. And also Dick Norton is working with him, and a number of us are throwing in to see if we can help to make that a success. All the thunder has been taken from you. The ZSAW is going to be the biggest thing for the next couple of days, I guess, and that's going to fill a lot of boxes for me. And the Mount Athos, I didn't really expect it to be approved. It was approved. That got me 2 new bands, 40 and 30, which was pretty cool. I have 339, and I don't think I'll hit 340 ever, or maybe 339 will be the top as soon as we eliminate North Korea. So, that's the upshot there. Just I'm on the air every day looking for something, working something, and so is Warren. We're just chatting back and forth and making announcements for each other, and that's kind of cool. And I don't know if Bill's not here anymore, N6WS, but he's in the mix too. That's about it. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks for stopping by. And I have a quick question. Do you think there would be interest from the guys in Southern Cal to come down for a summer bash?
I'll promote it. Give me the date, and I'll put it in the newsletters. I have a newsletter going out every month, and I'll put it in the newsletter as soon as we can, and we'll push an email out. We still Jim N6DHZ is still running the website, and we still have an email server that we push out emails to. In fact, okay, WA3, what's his name?
India Hotel Victor.
Yes,
That's me.
Where are you?
Right here. I guess I don't know. Oh, I'm right there.
Oh, okay, Bob.
Yeah.
He knows where to send emails to any announcements you want to send to our group.
Okay.
And you can do that. Oh,
good.
You actually, it's kind of crazy. Okay. There'll be interest. I think I'm gonna kind of talk it up a bit and get people to carpool down there.
Yeah, we haven't formalized the date. We're still trying to figure out. I mean, the late summer gets pretty hot down here, but doing it towards the coast, it'll be a little bit cooler, and maybe July seems to be the preferable time. So sometime late July, we'll probably do it at a park.
The one concern, we have picnics every summer. We used to. The last one we had at a pagoda at a park we normally go to, and there was no parking. It was backed up for about a half a mile to walk to the place, and a lot of people couldn't make it. Is this park fairly well represented? Is there a lot of people there? Or?
You know, I'll have to research that a little bit. I don't know. It's not real local to me, and years back when I was a little bit later, I ran a couple half marathons through there, but I haven't been there in years.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So I'll look into it. Brian, how are things in Texas?
Well, it's going well. I just got back. As you know, we were in San Diego. I was getting the last of my antenna gear, so I hope to start getting things up and get back active on the HF side of things. So haven't got anything to report from the radio perspective, but I am back in Texas. Made it nice. Weather's different here than San Diego. You know, it rained pretty heavily this morning and then cleared off. It was a beautiful day. So something we don't usually see in San Diego. So pretty regular event here. Anyway, that's what I'm doing, adjusting to the weather and trying to get my radio gear up.
Great. Well, thanks for stopping by and be safe in Texas. Jerry, how are things? You're up north, I guess, huh?
Yes, Calaveras County. It's about 50 miles east of Stockton, up in the foothills. Beautiful country, really nice. And my son and daughter-in-law live here near Railroad Flats. It's right in the foothills of the Sierras. Boy, they've got a great outlay here for antennas. I wish I lived here. But anyhow, nothing to report. Just doing a lot of traveling. I'm sure glad that presentation came off scot-free. Just fantastic. I sure am proud of this club. You guys have really done a lot, and it's great. Good to see.
Well, you guys have done a lot also to make this all possible. So
it's been a joint effort, and it's turned out really great.
We try to tee up some good programs here.
Yeah.
Have a safe trip coming home, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Howard, KY6LA, how are things? KY6LA? He's not there. We're a little bit out of sequence. I wanted to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, did you want to say something?
I wanted to.
Oh,
if I could. Quick Nickelback. This is Jim K6ZH. I don't know where the camera is. Okay. I'm a DXCC card checker. And so Steve, KE6FV, came by my house about 3 days ago, took care of you. And Bob a couple weeks before that. And Tom several times. So if you've got cards, I can do DXCC. I can do county. Well, not I can do grids and VUCC and Worktel States. So if you've got QSLs that are burning a hole and you want to get them counted, I can do it.
great. Thanks very much, Jim. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any old business or new business? We'll wrap it up. Thank you for everyone for coming. Welcome to the visitors on both ends, and we'll see you next month. Yeah, I will. Good. Thanks again. Have a good evening, everybody.